Music in professional wrestling serves a variety of purposes. The most common use of music in pro wrestling is theme song or entry song. In the 80s, as you heard at the top of the program, the first three songs I played, those were the theme songs of the world famous Rock and Roll Express. When those songs hit, you knew automatically who's coming out. And during that time, when you heard Rock and Roll is King, I remember going to the Greensboro Coliseum, and as soon as those drums started, that's all you could hear, because the pop that Ricky and Robert got, it literally blew the roof off of the Greensboro Coliseum. On the podcast today, we are going to be going over some of the hottest theme songs ever in pro wrestling, and we're going to be starting it off talking to my good friend Jeff Patton. He's going to be coming on in just a little bit. He and I are going to be discussing who had the best theme song of the 80s and who had the best entrance coming to the ring. Coming up next on the BENGEBUSTER Show. Ladies and gentlemen, from the studios in Lake Norman, North Carolina, it's the BENGEBUSTER Show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of the BENGEBUSTER Show. And as we heard at the top of the program, I played some of the most famous Rock and Roll Express theme songs of the 80s that really got your blood flowing when you was at a wrestling show. When you heard that music from the Rock and Roll Express, you couldn't help but come off your seat and chant rock and roll, rock and roll. And I can't tell you how many times I was at the Greensboro Coliseum, and when you heard Rock and Roll is King come on, it literally blew the roof off of the Greensboro Coliseum as 15 to 20,000 people were screaming rock and roll when Ricky and Robert came to the ring. On today's episode of the BENGEBUSTER Show, we are going to be talking about theme songs, entry songs. I'm going to tell you what my favorites are, and I'm bringing on my good friend Jeff Patton, as he and I are going to be discussing some of the best entry wrestling theme songs in the history of professional wrestling. But I will give you a little bit of background. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation on who and what wrestler was the first to use theme songs. It dates back all the way back to the 50s, when probably the first pro wrestler to have a real gimmick, Gorgeous George, and he came out to the song Pomp and Circumstance, which is incidentally the same song that Macho Man Randy Savage made popular in the 80s. Again, really good song that really gets you up on your feet, and whoa, something big's about to happen when you hear Pomp and Circumstance. And then another wrestler who makes claim of coming out in the music first was also Sergeant Slaughter. Says that he used the Marine hymn at Madison Square Garden in the 70s. But for me, growing up in the 80s of pro wrestling, the first team I can remember coming out to theme songs was the Fabulous Freebirds. Michael Hayes came out with the song Bad Street USA, and to me, that's probably one of my favorite wrestling theme songs ever. I think it's it's a really cool song, and that song really, Michael Hayes was like the first wrestler that I knew of that recorded his own theme song. Now I know later on, as I found out that my good friend Handsome Jimmy Valiant actually recorded a song down in Memphis in the late 70s, but Bad Street USA was a song of the 80s that the Freebirds came out to, and when you heard that song, you knew somebody was about to get beat up, and the song kind of went like this.
See, let's walk down the street, they ran me up the way. Bad Street, Atlanta, DA. Bad Street in the whole USA. Bad Street, nasty and hot. The further down the block you went, the better it got.
Now, just think about those words of that song. I mean, that really gets you going. My favorite part of the song, or a verse, it says in there, Bad Street, USA, the baddest street in the whole USA. Bad Street is nasty and hot, and the best part is when it says, the further down the block you went, the badder it got. So hearing those words, you knew that the Freebirds were the baddest three guys that's walking the face of the earth. I know in the 80s, like 84, when I first saw the Freebirds on television, and their really hot feud with the Von Erichs, they would come out to Bad Street, and they even had matches called Bad Street matches. And I remember seeing a promo with the Freebirds, and they were like in this beat-up house, and Michael Hayes and Buddy Roberts were standing in front of the house, and they was cutting a promo on the Von Erichs. And then Michael called for Bam Bam. And next thing you know, you hear glass breaking, and you see you see Bam Bam come through the window and come out pulls off his belt and puts the belt buckle up and tells the Von Erichs how bad he's going to beat him. And man, watching that, you really knew the Freebirds were three badass dudes that was ready to kill somebody. And they were like the coolest bad guys that I ever saw on television. And as a matter of fact, when I first started wrestling, I kind of robbed a little stuff from Michael Hayes. I used to do the Michael Hayes strut and the moonwalk, and of course I put my comedy spill into it and made it funny. But man, Michael Hayes was he was a really cool wrestler in the 80s when I first started watching wrestling. But anyway, we're going to go to a commercial break now. And when we come back, I'm going to have my good friend Jeff Patton, and we're going to discuss the coolest 80s wrestling entrances and theme songs of all time. The NAWA presents Thunderdome 2, Saturday, August 31st, bell time 7 p.m. at the Burke County Fairgrounds in Morganton, North Carolina. Scheduled to appear, Leo Pride versus King Craig Classic. In the gauntlet match, Max Carney, Dre White, Jack Scherzen, Merrick Moore, and Axel Jaggers. And for the NAWA Western Carolina Championship, the champion, Lucky Ali, defends against Austin Jordan. For the NAWA Heavyweight title, the champion, Adam James, defends against Thomas Extreme. And in the main event, the Thunderdome 2, you'll see the Carolina Cartel take on the Burke County Boys. That's Saturday, August 31st, bell time 7 p.m. at the Burke County Fairgrounds in Morganton, North Carolina. All right, everyone, welcome back to the BengeBuster Show. I am joined now by my good friend, Jeff Patton. Jeff, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing great, brother. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. Yeah, it has been a while.
But, I was thinking about doing this podcast on wrestling theme music from the 80s and entrances. Because, now when you watch wrestling on TV, it seems like the entrance is a really, really, really big thing. And in some instances, the entrance is better than the match. But going back to the 80s, Jeff, like 83 to 80, we'll say 83 to 87, from like Jim Crockett Promotions and even a little bit of the WWF, before they went into the copyright stuff, wrestlers would actually come out to real music, real songs. And I was explaining to my listeners how when the Rock and Roll Express's Rock and Roll is King would start up, it would blow the roof off the building. And for me, as a kid, hearing that, it really blew my mind at how, just as soon as the fans just heard that first little drum beat, they knew exactly rock and roll was coming out, and they went nuts. So what are like some of your favorite entrances from wrestlers from the 80s?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, that song "Rock and Roll is King," when it hit, I mean, you knew the place was going to erupt. Some of the other ones I liked was the Midnight Express, and I guess they had a couple versions, different versions of their theme music, which of course was the theme from the movie The Midnight Express. And of course, everybody remembers Ric Flair and the 2001 Space Odyssey theme music that he used.
Mm-hmm.
Those were two of my favorites, and of course, I know one of our favorites, definitely both you and I, is of course the Boy from New York City with Jimmy Valiant.
Oh yeah, when I remember in '84 when he was like his big time in NWA, where he was like the biggest star there. As soon as you heard that boom boom boom, man, you got goosebumps, and Boogie's coming out, and Jeff, a funny story. Of course, you made this story possible, so I gotta tell you the story. But the very first time I wrestled Jimmy Valiant there at the Burke County Fairgrounds for you, I remember, I came to the ring, I believe, to Frankenstein by Edgar Wintergroup. Then once I got in the ring, I had my robe on and everything, working the crowd. I'm sitting there waiting, and all of a sudden I heard the boom, 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 and man, Jeff, for 10 seconds I was frozen in time, and I was 10 years old again. And I had to, scratch my head and make sure I was living, because that was like the biggest spot in my life. Was I'm hearing Boy from New York City, and I'm seeing, the guy that was my favorite wrestler as a 10-year-old kid coming to the ring to wrestle me. And man, that was a great feeling. I had goosebumps, and man, for a minute I had to shake my head and put myself back in the match and let me, hey, I'm wrestling now. I'm not watching this. I got to get it together. But man, you're right. That song really got the would get the crowd going.
Yeah, you talking about that song. I remember back in like 1995, I took a break from wrestling for a while, and when I came back in, I was doing ring announcing for Mark Henderson, who at the time was running NAWA, and he had Jimmy Valiant booked on a show. And I remember he played that music. Jimmy Valiant came to the ring with that music, and I was just in the ring. I was like, my mouth dropped. I was like, and I got chills and goosebumps, because, and Jimmy Valiant would go out and almost the whole song would play, because he would go out and tag every single fan's hands.
Oh yeah, he's up.
And then he'd get a couple and he'd start dancing with them, and he definitely knew how to get the crowd, behind him and cheer for him. And that music just was Jimmy Valiant all over right there.
Yeah, because you think about it, when you hear that song, okay, remove yourself from Jimmy Valiant, but if you first hear that song, you're like, this song is dumb. But when you hear that song and you see Boogie coming out doing his boogie dance and just dancing and doing his, man, you can't help but love the song.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he gets it over with you.
Yeah.
Now, you touched briefly on the Midnight Express's theme song. That song has such a good beat to it, and then whenever you see Bobby and Stan, or Dennis and Bobby, come to the ring to that music, it's there's no words, it's just music, but something's about to happen as they're coming out to that song.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Some of the other entry music that I remember, superstar Billy Graham used Kung Fu Fighting. That was, and the one that I forgot about until I can't remember what I was watching and saw him wrestle was the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez used "Beat It" from Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah,
which I never really thought. I thought that was kind of odd. It didn't really fit his persona, but it was pretty funny to see that.
Yeah. You know, going back to the Crockett years, you know, a lot of the songs that the wrestlers would come out to, you know, and there for a while it seemed like a lot of wrestlers in Crockett promotions, just a few had music. I remember Dusty Rhodes would come out to Old Time Rock and Roll. At Starrcade '84, he came out to Purple Rain, and he came to the ring wearing a purple robe when he worked Dusty Rhodes. I'm sorry, Ric Flair. But you know, a lot of wrestlers didn't have music all the time, but when they had big events like Starrcade, they would come out to music. I remember the movie Flashdance was really big, and there was a song in there called "He's a Dream," and I remember at Starrcade '85, The Gathering, Tully Blanchard came to the ring to that song, and I thought that song was really cool. It actually went along with Tully Blanchard's like Playboy type badass persona that he portrayed. I'll tell you, Jeff, I thought one of the coolest themes ever was when Ravishing Rick Rude came in. Excuse me, he had that girl voice that would say, "Oh Ricky, you're so ravishing, where'd you come from?" And then the song would cut in, the song Smooth Operator would cut right into the chorus. No need to ask, he's a smooth operator. I thought that was a really cool and ingenuous way to present Rick Rude.
Oh yeah, most definitely, definitely was. Some of the other, of course, Iron Man for the Road Warriors. Who can forget that one?
Yeah. I think that one would probably be my number two. Not just because of the song, but like when you hear that song, and then you'd see the Road Warriors, running down the aisle to the ring. That would really make the hair on the back of your head stand up. And if like the fans now of wrestling, I'll say this to the day I die. There's been the Rock pop, Steve Austin pop, but I would bet every dime in my bank account that no matter how big their pop was never what everybody in the business calls the Road Warrior pop. And when you'd hear the beginning of Iron Man, and then that guitar would come in, man, the place would go nuts when Hawk and Animal would come out.
Yeah, most definitely. And even when they turned heel on Dusty Rhodes, it wasn't going to last long, because they were just, everybody would just love them because they were just so awesome. They were, to me, they were the first, weightlifting, big muscles, wrestlers back in, when I was growing up. Those were, you didn't see that. The guys were in shape, most of them were in good shape, but as far as big muscles and just, with the face paint and all that stuff, you didn't see that until the Road Warriors came.
No, you're exactly right. And Jeff, one of the matches that I hate we never got, or feuds that I hate we never got to see finish and go all the way out, was the Road Warriors against the Powers of Pain.
Yeah, of course, those guys, the Powers of Pain left to go to WWF.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
at the time.
Funny story about that. I was on the show one time with Barbarian, and I was talking to him about it, and I said, "Barb," I said, you robbed me of my childhood. He said, "What you talking about, brother?" And how Barbarian talks. And I told him the deal. I said, "Man, I was in Greensboro. My dad brought me to Greensboro the night that you guys done the weightlifting contest, and you threw Animal into the barbell." And he said, "Oh, let me tell you." He said, "That wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen. We were supposed to throw him into the barbell." He said, "But we didn't know the barbell was going to fall over." He said, and Tommy Young and a couple of ring guys were trying to grab the barbell to keep it from going into the crowd and mowing down the people. He said, that wasn't supposed to happen. He said, but it did look good for television. He said, but the deal was, if I remember the story right, he was telling me that he went and asked. Once they saw how big the angle was getting, they went to Crockett and asked for more money, because back then it wasn't a contract; they were just being paid as they came. And they went to Crockett and asked for more money, and Crockett said, kind of put them off. And so it was like during the Great American Bash, they went told him, said, listen, if we're doing these scaffold matches, we got to get more money. And he said again, Crockett seemed like he kept putting them off, so they just called Vince and said, hey, you got a spot open up there? And Vince said, yeah, sure. And they said, well, can we get paid this much? And Vince said, sure, come on up. And so they basically walked out of Crockett. They advertised for the Great American Bash, and like the next day when the bashes were supposed to start, they left and went to WWF.
Yeah. So the scaffold match never happened.
So no,
I'm kind of mad. I mean, I didn't. I mean, they were pretty cool, but I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the scaffold match.
No, and during
I'm sure the wrestlers didn't like them either.
No, and really, if me personally, a feud between the Road Warriors and the Powers of Pain, I wouldn't have done a scaffold. I would have done a cage, or something like that, and then maybe save the scaffold for the very last deal. But I think during that time, this is probably '88. Crockett Promotions, as we all know, wasn't in the best shape, so I think they were just kind of putting everything out there at the beginning, hoping to draw people in to make money, so that they wouldn't have to sell the company. Is what I believe that they were doing in that scenario.
Yeah. Goodness gracious, I'm thinking about other entry music. You were talking about Starrcade '85 and the when it came out on VHS. Of course, everybody used the Starrcade theme for entry music. They didn't play any entry music from Greensboro Coliseum or from Atlanta, Georgia in the Omni where they did the shows.
That was kind of a letdown how they overdubbed their music and just put in the Starrcade theme. You're right. Although that is a good theme, I like the theme, but I would liked it better if they could have kept the original music in there. I think that would have been cool. I'll tell you another song that I think was a cool entry song. And granted, Superstar Billy Graham, when he turned babyface and went back to the tie-dye, he came out to Bad to the Bone, and that was a good song and a good look for him. But I'll tell you, the people who I think was cooler coming out to Bad to the Bone was gentleman Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez in World Class Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, and of course, now we're talking about World Class. I mean, the Stranglehold. One of the Kevin Von
Erich. Yeah,
you Stranglehold from Ted Nugent. Yeah, that was a cool entry music.
Yeah, and also another one was what was Kerry Von Erich's Tom Sawyer, Modern Day Warrior.
Yeah, because that was his. That was like what they called him, the Modern Day Warrior.
Mm-hmm. And they're in World Class. They had a lot of people coming in and going out during that time. And I remember what's his name, Iceman King Parsons. He would come out to "We Are Family." Remember that song?
Yeah.
When he was babyface.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The other one I was just thinking of was, when you hear the song, you think, well, the name of this song is "Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog," but really it's "Joy to the World." Bugsy McGraw used it.
Oh yeah, Bugsy. Yeah.
The old song, "Joy to the World."
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
Now I know you and I are from Mid-Atlantic, and of course, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling is definitely the mecca for us. But as a kid, starting to really get into wrestling, I remember when Hulk Hogan would come out to "Eye of the Tiger," he would get a really big pop from that song as well.
Yeah, and of course, I think the Rocky movie was where that song was first
Right. Yeah.
introduced. Right.
That's kind of where he got it from. And then another wrestler from the WWF that had a different song that had a really cool entrance was Junkyard Dog when he came out to Another One Bites the Dust.
Oh yeah, yeah, most definitely. Forgot about that one. And of course, we remember the old famous um, Slammy album. Wasn't that the name of the album? What was the WWF album?
Oh
Where
no,
I think somebody
the
got that.
very first wrestling album that the WWF came out with, it was called the Wrestling Album, and that was the one where they had commentary between the songs. When the tape or the album first started, it came on. All the wrestlers were singing "Land of a Thousand Dances," and then it went into commentary with Vince McMahon, Gene Okerlund, and Jesse Ventura. And they had some pretty funny things in there. I'll never forget, Jesse Ventura, he had like the best one-liners. But on that album, he talked about Vince. Vince was like, our next person is going to be Captain Lou Albano. And I remember Jesse Ventura said, "You got to be kidding me. Captain Lou Albano, what's he going to be doing? Strum the rubber bands on his face?" I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, but yeah, I got that. Got that for Christmas one year. The record album.
Yep, me too. But
all the wrestlers on the front of it.
But Jeff, they came out with two of them. They had the wrestling album, which was the one that came out I think 85, and then in 87 they had another one that was called Pile Driver, and I think that one was way better than the original wrestling album. I mean, some of the songs on there were really good. Like the Honky Tonk Man. I mean, his song has lasted his whole career, and he actually sang the words to it. Of course, the title track "Pile Driver" by Coco Beware, that was a good one. That to me, that's and Demolition song was really cool off that album. But the first one was more, it was more comedic and kind of pointed like towards little kids. But when the second one came out, Pile Driver, to me it was more. It's still gimmicky, because during that time, every wrestler in the WWF had a over the top gimmick, but I think some of the music on there was done a lot better than the music on the original album.
Yeah, yeah. We were talking about all this, but it's so funny how wrestling has changed so much over the years. You go back. When I was born in 1972, so when I first started watching wrestling, it was late 70s, and there was no intro music. I mean, when they, I don't know how it was in, when you went to the gymnasiums or whatever and watched the show live, but on TV, the guys, when they come back from commercial, the guys are in the ring,
right? Yeah,
and then. And even I think the very first show I went to was in like 1983, and it was here in Morganton, and none of the wrestlers that I remember had entry music. They all just came to the ring, and and then of course they started doing the entry music later, but. I don't remember anybody using entry music at the very first event I went to in '83, and then the second one I went to, I want to say it was '86 maybe in Charlotte. Almost everybody used entry music except for the jobbers when they went to the ring, but
yeah,
definitely. And now everybody uses entry music, so. Definitely has changed.
Yeah, and it takes me back to something that Jimmy Valiant told me one time. I was on a show with him, and and was talking about people using music and stuff. And he said, "Yeah, brother," he said, "everybody's using music. So tonight maybe you should go out with no music because now you're being different than everybody else." I said, "That's a good idea, Boogie." And I remember on that show, I was the only wrestler on the show that went out with no music, and it was kind of funny too because the people were like they were looking at me like they was expecting music. And of course, I got on the mic and I cut a promo how I thought music was stupid and it was the dumbest of people there in that podunk town and blah blah blah. And I got a lot of heat. And then of course after my match, Boogie was like, "See, brother, it worked." I said, "Yep, you're right, Boogie, it did." But yeah, it's crazy how much wrestling has changed. Jeff, looking back, in the '80s, like you said, not every wrestler had music, but not only that, but when they came to the ring, now on TV they got pyro, they got laser lights, they got a big screen in the background showing the highlights of the matches and everything like that. When we would go watch wrestling in the '80s, the wrestlers actually came through the crowd, and I remember the one thing, and you're gonna get a good kick out of this. When I knew I wanted to be a wrestler.
When's that?
It was when I went to the Greensboro Coliseum one night, and the Rock'n'Roll Express came out, and when they were coming through the crowd, by the time they got through the crowd, their shirts were ripped off, and the girls were screaming like crazy. And I said, when I grow up, I'm gonna be just like Ricky Morton. So, yeah, and of course, but then when I got into wrestling and met you guys and everything, and I didn't want to be a babyface. I wanted to be a heel because it seemed like heels had, it was cooler to be a heel, and so I did that, and so therefore I didn't get my shirt ripped off there going to the ring anyway, but anyway, that was some fun stuff. And as the years went by, Jeff, when I first broke into the business with you guys, my first theme song was actually "Bad to the Bone."
Yeah, I remember that. You talking about Ricky Morton, bro? Let me tell you a story about Ricky Morton. When I was going to school and the Rock'n'Roll Express were popular, I had this one girl I had a crush on, and she looked at me. She looked at my face one time and said, "You kind of look like Ricky Morton." So I started letting my hair grow out. And I came to school one day. I started letting my hair grow out, and I had my hair spiked up. And she thought that was the coolest thing, and she's playing with my hair. So, yeah, I wanted to be Ricky Morton,
yeah,
too.
Hey, we all want to be Ricky Morton, that's for sure. He's such a fun guy to be around, too. But, I was just like you, one thing about 80s wrestling that I don't think Ricky Morton gets enough credit for, and that is he was, my opinion now, but he was the first guy to have the coolest haircut, the mullet, the long in the back and spiked on top. And if you look back, Jeff, by the time Ricky was the first guy to have the mullet, and then by the time I say by '86, almost every wrestler in the business had a mullet. It may not have been spiked up like Ricky's, but they all had mullets.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget when I first met you. I had a really cool mullet. And then I got this new job, and they told me I had to cut my hair to get the job. And I had been wrestling with you, but maybe a couple months or so. And I remember I come to the show with my mullet cut off, and you said, "Tony, you got a haircut." And Ralph Harkey said, "Tony, you killed your gimmick." I'll never forget that, as long as I live.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the thing, man. And of course, I had it too. I had it going on too.
Oh, when I first,
going on for a long time.
Yeah, me too. I'll tell you a funny mullet story for me. So I had that mullet. That was probably 92, 93. So by I cut it off, and then I started letting it grow back a little bit. Well, around 2001. I grew my mullet back, and I guess during this time was probably the longest it ever was. And I remember I had this job working at a high school, and I kept hearing the kids go, "Joe Dirt, Joe Dirt," and I'm like, "What in the heck is Joe Dirt?" And so one night I'm hanging out with some of my friends, and I heard them say the word Joe Dirt, and I said, wait a minute, what did you guys just say? And they said, Joe Dirt. I said, what? Wait a minute, what in the heck is a Joe Dirt? And they said, you ain't never seen the movie? I'm like, no. They go, brother, it's you, except you don't have the sideburns. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they went and got the DVD and put it in. And I said, so those kids are making fun of me. They're not like calling me like cool. They're making fun of me. So the next day I went and cut my mullet off, and I haven't had one since. And since it took me a while to realize the mullet was out of style, but
hey man, when I went to work one day and I heard some little kid, his mom is like, Mom, what's that girl over there doing? I said, I'm cutting it off.
Yep.
I'm cutting it off. That was it for me.
Hey, you're telling this story. I got to tell you a really funny story. So remember back when I had my red convertible?
Yes.
Okay. So one night, me, Kenny, Mark, and John were like riding through downtown High Point, and so we left the mall, and I said, hey guys, I said, remember back when we was in high school, how we used to cruise on the Strip? And Kenny's like, yeah. I said, well, let's just drive down there and see what's going on. I said, okay. Of course, we get down there and there's people everywhere. So here I'm in my red convertible with 3 other guys, and every one of us have long hair. So we're driving. All of a sudden, this pickup truck is like blowing the horn, beep, 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 blowing the horn at us, right? And I'm like, what in the world? And I remember we pull up at the stoplight, and we're looking over, and these guys pull up in this truck, and they're expecting us all to be girls, and they're like, woo! And when they look over, and they see us all 4 guys, and they look at us, and then of course crazy Mark, he tells them, we're not girls, you stupid blanks, and then the guys just looked at us like they were total morons. And it was so funny. And as we drove away, Kenny goes, hey guys, I think it's time we get a haircut. These dudes think we're girls. And I said, yeah. And then I come back and I said, well, I said, you remember what Motley Crue used to say? And he goes, oh, what's that? I said, remember when they done the video, they said, just because we wear lipstick don't mean we can't kick your tails. And I said, so just because we got long hair don't mean we can't kick them guys' tails. And Kenny busted out laughing. And man, we laughed about that for about a year. Like Kenny, every time we go down that road, he's like, put your top up, man. Put your top up. We don't want no more guys trying to pick us up.
Oh, goodness.
So not only has wrestling changed, so have we, because now I don't have a whole lot of hair left, but it's so funny how, getting back to that, the different theme songs that wrestlers would use in the 80s, and, some of that music's still around, and when I hear certain songs on the radio, I don't think of the band singing a song. I immediately think of a wrestler. Like every time I hear Bad to the Bone, I think of Gina Hernandez and Chris Adams. Every time I hear ZZ Top, Sharp Dressed Man, I don't think of ZZ Top. I think of Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin,
Yeah. Forgot about him. Forgot to mention him, yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, every time I hear Iron Man, I'm thinking about the Road Warriors come running to the ring and some poor jobber's going to get it,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. A funny story, Jeff, about Iron Man. I have a 4-year-old, and so a lot of times when we're in the car together, I'm playing my music or whatever. Well, his favorite song is Iron Man, right? So I gotta be the coolest parent ever. How many parents let their kid listen to Black Sabbath? But I'll never forget. We're going down the road one time, and he's like, "Daddy, put in Iron Man," and I'm like, "Okay." And I start playing it, and man, he knows the words. He's singing the words to me, and it just blew me away. And I'm like, this is pretty cool. But he looks at it from a different perspective than me. He likes the song Iron Man. I like it because when I hear it, I think of the Road Warriors. But when he hears it, he thinks of the Marvel character Iron Man. So, it's so neat how that song can just, you hear it, you don't think of Ozzy, you think of Animal and Hawk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess it's just, where we grew up, watching those guys, and, back when wrestling was wrestling, man. I mean, now it's, entertainment. It's not really a sport like it was back when we were growing up, and, the music now, it's all, they have their own music made. You can't use, if you're in the WWE or, I guess TNA is the same way. You have to have music made for your wrestling character. And, it's not like it used to be when, I could go out and, and the funny thing is when I heard Iron Man for the first time, I looked at somebody, I said, who does that song and how can I get it on cassette tape? Because, we didn't have, CDs back then. It was cassette tapes.
And you couldn't Google the song either, like you can now, right?
Yeah, we didn't have internet, didn't have all this, like they do now. And now it's and I see it on Facebook all the time. People have got, nobody knows how hard it was back in the 80s when you would listen to the radio waiting to record that song you wanted on cassette tape. Remember those days when you had to listen to the radio all day just to hear that one song to record it?
Like, I remember Bad to the Bone. Now, of course, I came from a very strict parents that they thought all rock and roll music was of the devil, and if you listen to rock music, you're going to burn in hell. But so a lot of my music, I would have to sneak in the house. I'd get my neighbors to record a tape, and I'd sneak the tape in my bedroom. And I guess I was probably 12 before I could finally be able to listen to music without. I finally convinced my mother that I wasn't going to hell because I was listening to Michael Jackson. But I remember the very first when I first heard Bad to the Bone, I was like, man, I love that song. I got to find that song. And of course, I didn't know how to find it. And this cool kid that was in my class, his name was Mike Orman. And Mike, one day we were talking, and I was like, man, I said, the songs I like the Rock and Roll Express's song, Dusty's song, which at the time was Old Time Rock and Roll, and Bad to the Bone. And he's like, oh yeah. He goes, I'll make you a tape and bring it to you. And I was like, oh, you will? Yeah. And he did. He made me a little tape, and on that tape, the very first song was Rock and Roll is King, and then Old Time Rock and Roll, and then Bad to the Bone. And then, Jeff, now here's something, I don't know if you remember this, but in 1986, when Jim Crockett Promotions was doing the Great American Bashes, rap music was starting to kind of come out, but it wasn't really full-fledged rap yet. And Jim Crockett and them done a commercial on the radio of the Great American Bash, and it was a rap song with Dusty and Magnum, the Rock and Roll Express, and Boogie. They were doing this little rap song commercial, and he put that on that tape. And it was so funny. But the highlight of the song, it comes on, and the first person I wished I had this on tape. It was wonderful. But the first guy to talk about the bash was Boogie Woogie, and of course he says, it went something like, right there in Charlotte at the Memorial Stadium, I'm going to shave Pez Whatley's head. He's going to be a bald-headed geek or whatever. And then the next person to talk was Magnum, and Magnum said, this is Magnum TA. It goes something like, this is Magnum TA, and I'm all fired up. They taking my belt because I leveled some chump. Well, enough is enough. Bring Nikita on, and watch out for Ivan because they both try to cheat you. And then Ricky and Robert did their spot, and this was so cool. Robert goes, Robert goes, hey, Robert. And then, Ricky goes, hey, Robert. And Robert goes, hey, Ricky. And then Ricky goes, singing music's kind of tricky, but we can do it because we're the Rock and Roll Express. And I thought that was so friggin' cool. And then, of course, Dusty Rhodes does his spot. He's the last one to talk, and he says something like, this is Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. And when I walk down the aisle, all the ladies scream. It was just so funny. I wish I could find that commercial, man. It was great. But that was kind of like the beginning of wrestlers doing their own music, because Boogie was telling me this. He said that the reason why they all went to Crockett went out and hired these people to do each wrestler's own music was because Dusty kept going on television, and he'd come out to old time rock and roll, and then NWA had got over so big that Bob Seger's producers sent Jim Crockett a letter and said that if they play old time rock and roll on their television again, then he was going to sue them for royalties. So then that's when they stopped. They actually Dusty changed his song, stopped using old time rock and roll, and started using Hank Williams Jr. because during that time Hank was doing the Great American Bashes with them. So he used that, but then they finally just went to all doing their own music. And as a matter of fact, I'm looking on Wikipedia right now, and it said the reason why wrestling promotions went to their own music, it said, due to licensing costs, entrance themes are often composed by the promotion for which the wrestler works for in order to avoid having to pay out royalties to these bigger stars. And it says a promotion might also purchase music from a production library, which is also considered to be cheaper than the royalties of a commercial music or used public domain music. So basically, that's what happened. The reason why they do that now is because the big, music stars, they see how big wrestling is, and so they want to get their piece of the pie, and I can't blame them, But on the same sense, don't get mad at me because I'm using 30 seconds of your song to walk to the ring. Ain't like I'm playing the whole song. But unfortunately, a lot of people are like, well, if you play 10 seconds, that's my music, so you got to pay me.
Yeah. Luckily we never got big enough to where we were
right. We'd have been in trouble because
yeah.
Think about that for a minute, though, Jeff. Like, on the independent scene, like what would we had done if that had happened? We all would have been walking out with no music because there's no way that we could afford to hire somebody, to do our own music.
Right, unless somebody knows somebody in a band that would be willing to, come up with stuff for us. And I mean, we had there. I remember there was a guy that managed for us for a while. He came with Mad Dog David Lynch.
Oh yeah, I remember him. He's the guy that his name was Rip, right? Rip something.
I can't remember exactly what his name was, but Rip Carnage was what he wrote. Rip Carnage, that's it. Yep. Yeah, that was his name. Yeah, and he was in a band. I want to say it was Anti-Scene. Okay. And, I believe was the name of their band. If I'm not mistaken, it's been so long ago, but I remember. And I had actually talked to him about doing a gig with his band, doing a wrestling with his band, but they did like the thrash metal, and I just didn't think that would go over very well here. Yeah. A lot of people just don't like that type of at the time that wasn't very popular music. No. So I didn't go with it, but talk about some of the old Burke County wrestling theme music. I remember the show that we had on TV here local. We used the Final Countdown from Europe.
Oh yeah,
was our theme music for the show, and then the first one, and then of course I changed it to the old World Championship Wrestling theme there for a while, and I'm trying to think of what we did when we went to change over to New World Wrestling. I can't remember exactly what we used, but that was, and then of course I remember we used to use Frankenstein.
Yeah, a lot. You and I used that. We used the Midnight Express's theme. We did that a couple of times. Now, I have to tell you this. I had never heard the song Fantasy until I met you. And I remember when the first time I came and watched your show, wasn't even in the business yet, but I came and watched the show, and you came out to that song, and I was like, man, that song is freaking awesome. I love this song. So I had to go out and buy it. Now that's like one of my favorite songs. And if you fans at home don't know the song, it's Fantasy by Aldo Nova.
Yep.
That's a great wrestling theme
I'll tell
song.
you. Oh yeah, and I remember, this is no lie. I remember before I got into wrestling, my brother and I would hang out with my cousin, and she was like a year or two older than me, and she was driving before I was, of course, and she was a tomboy. You know, she loved to play football, and you know, she never dressed up, but she liked hanging out with us. And so we went out just riding around, and she would play music real loud. And that's the first time I heard that song. And she, with the helicopter or whatever landing. And when I heard it, I was like, and I thought in the back of my mind, I was like, that would make great wrestling theme music. And when we got into wrestling, I used it, so there you go. That's how that became. So yeah, and he used to always tick my brother off because I was in a feud with him, and he used to always get mad. He was like, "I hate waiting for you to come to the ring because that music takes forever to get kicked." And I said that was just me being my heel and making people wait on me and making people hate me even more. I said that was me. So
and it worked. But not only that, Jeff, if when you're a fan sitting in the crowd and you hear that song, you think, man, he just flew in on a helicopter. You know, he just landed outside. You know, if when it's loud enough, that's kind of the idea that song portrays, is the fact that, you know, you just landed on a helicopter and now you're coming out. And I'll tell you, Jeff, the only thing that would have made that gimmick of yours much better is if when you come out with that song, you had, you know, some kind of flashy jacket or a flashy robe. Man, that really would set that gimmick off, like, you know, into the next millennium.
Yeah, and the sad part is you know, I was the promoter, so, and you know, we weren't making money, so I was the one spending and paying it for everything. So I didn't have money to buy flashy gear.
Right.
And
none of us did, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. None of us really had the money for flashy gear. So, you know, that just the way it was. But yeah, theme music. I remember I used. Then I went for a while. I used "You Got Another Thing Coming" from Judas Priest.
Yeah.
And here over the last many years, the first time I heard this song, I was like, man, that's my new theme music right there. And it was "Trust" from Megadeth.
Oh yeah,
and that is a really good theme music. So, but some of the other ones that "Danger Zone" for Big Donnie, Dangerous Donnie.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah, that fit him. But yeah.
I'm trying to think. Oh, and you can't forget the Heartbreakers when they come out to the Heartbreaker by Pat Benatar.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and anytime I hear somebody use Heartbreaker, I just want to smack them. I'm like, no.
That's Scotty and Scotty's song, right?
Yeah, don't even. I said no. That's no. That's the Heartbreaker song. Nobody needs to use that.
And I'll tell you another one that I like too that I used to pop for when I was when I first broke in with BCW was when John Sullivan came out to Cinderella's "If You Don't Like It, I Don't Care." That was a great heel. That was a great heel song.
Oh yeah, yeah, yep.
And you know, Jeff, looking back in those years in '93, I remember you had that one guy, Too Funky, and he would come out to rap music, and I remember you saying, "Rap music don't belong in wrestling. What's this guy thinking? He needs to get something else to come out to, you know?" Because at that time, you know, rap music, it I mean, it wasn't on the radio like it is now. And so now if you go watch WWE, a lot of the music sounds like rap music, you know?
Right. Yeah. And again, it's, how times have changed, from back in the 90s, back in 93, 94, 95, when we were on TV every week, and having a good time, most of the time anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that was some, all that time back then, it was such great memories, such fun times. I wish I could go back in time, but know what I know now in the business. Man, there's so much stuff I would have done so much differently,
Definitely. And as a promoter, I look back and I think, man, what if, there were a lot of things I did back in those days. I mean, when we first had the little AMVETS Club, I mean, we were doing really good there. And then it's like, I think we did too many shows there. Then I remember somebody talked me into raising the admission price because, paying $3 to see wrestling just wasn't enough to charge people. And then we went up to $5 and didn't tell nobody, and people wouldn't pay that and left. The first time we tried to charge them $5 to see wrestling, so, if we'd have kept it at $3 and, what would have happened, if I would have been a more, put my foot down promoter, what would have happened?
Mm-hmm. Well, the key there, Jeff, what we should have said was free admission. You just got to pay $5 to leave.
Yeah, but I'll never will forget the very last show we did at the AMVETS Post. I did free admission. Man, that place was packed. I'll never forget that. That place was packed.
Yeah, that was a fun show. There were so many fun things we done there in that little building. And then Jeff, it kept getting better because once we got that building up there in uptown Morganton, the matches got much better. The crowds got really good. And it seemed like everybody was just having a great time. There wasn't no egos. There wasn't no I'm better than you or you better than me. It was a group effort. We all put forth our heart and soul, and really had a good time.
Right, and again, when we left that building, I remember, because I was losing money. And at the time we were losing money. I think it was, when we first started, there were 8 of us that were kind of going in together and doing the shows. And then by the time we were finished, it wasn't but 3 of us, and that was me, you, and Donnie. Yeah. And, it was we were just losing too much money. And then I remember somebody had actually told me that they had talked to the owner of the building, and he was just curious as to why I wouldn't sign another year lease on the building. And somebody told him that we were losing money, and he was like, well, I'd have dropped the rent, and I was like, really, because he wanted to keep us there. So it's like, okay, maybe, but I let too many things happen that year that just let me down, and just things never go the way you want them to. I've learned that about life.
Used to I was such a perfectionist, and I want everything to be right, everything how I imagine it. But since I started doing this podcast, I'm like, okay, this is me. This is what I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna get on here and write out, okay, at the 1 minute mark I got to say this. I just go with the flow. I don't try to overthink stuff. I just let it out, and I've started doing that in real life, because I've realized that no matter how much you worry, it's not going to change the outcome. but don't let the outcome change you. You know, that kind of thing, and that's kind of what I've lived by. You know, the last few years, and I would say in the last 3 years, I've kind of had that philosophy to myself, because prior to that, I was always worried about pleasing this person, pleasing that person, but now I just take care of Trivik Tony. You know, I'm and I take care of my family. I'm not saying that, but what I mean is I don't go out there and do my match and think about pleasing, you know, the fan or the person. I just do what I feel in my heart is the right thing to do, and that's just what I do, and not let people get to me. And I know that's probably the hardest thing in life to do is not let somebody get to you. But at the end of the day, I realize that nobody's opinion matters but mine. You know, when it comes to me.
Right. And you know, a lot of people have been, man, bring BCW back. Bring it back. When you get, you know, a ring and all this, that, and other. And I'm like, man, you know, I mean, I've been burned so much by wrestling. You know, I don't have the desire to do that again. I mean, I'm not saying I don't have the desire to wrestle anymore. I don't have the desire to go out and buy a ring and start every, you know what I'm saying? And because it's never going to be the same again.
No, and
you know, even if we get all the guys back together, it's never going to be the same again.
No,
it never will be.
And the problem with that too, Jeff, is there's a lot of things there involved. One is we're not 22, 23 years old anymore, so our outlook's different. Number two. Now, every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street corner has got a ring and a promotion. so
Right.
You know, you know, I remember I was talking about this on one of the other podcasts. I remember when I first started wrestling around this area, there was me, and then there was another promotion, and there's one in Burlington. So around this part of my, or not where I live now, but when I lived in Thomasville, around that area, there was only 3 promoters, so you only had to see 3 shows at that time. Now, man, there's 3 promoters on one street, seems like. And I remember I was running this Boys and Girls Club in High Point. I ran it, and then next thing I know, somebody else was running it, and then another guy ran it. And I remember I would call them because the lady would give me such a good deal on the building. But once all these other people started coming in and they saw how good I was drawing, it's like, well, let me run a show there. And I'll never forget, Dennis Condrey told me, he said, Tony, he said, any guys that work for you, if they're working for that other promoter, don't use them anymore. I don't care if they're your best friend or your brother, or your sister, or who, but if they're going to work for another promoter that's running the same building as you and their shows are crappy, then what's going to happen is those people that came, he said, because most fans, they don't look at it's NAWA or WCW or NWA. They don't look at that. All they look at is wrestling. And when they see the same names on the poster, they think it's the same company, even though it's not, but that's what they think. And he says, no, they go there and they see a bad show, and then they're not going to buy tickets to come to yours because they're going to think that, well, I just saw that show last week and it was a terrible show. I'm not going back. And I said, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the people that own these facilities that I've rented over the years never could see that point. I mean, some of them did. Like I still will never to this day forget, you know, the guy that owned the Amvets club that we would run 2 or 3 times a month on Sunday afternoons. I'll never forget when he told me that Jim Cornette had called him and had asked him about renting the place. And he turned it down. He said, no, I'm letting the Burke County wrestling here, and that's it. I'm not dealing but with one promotion. And, I mean, you know, that was I still will never forget that.
Yeah, that's big.
And, you know, very, very few that I've dealt with have been like that. And it's not saying I'm sure Cornette would go in there and probably do a better show than we would. But it's just, you know, to me.
Well, it was loyalty.
You
know, the owner of that building. Yeah, the owner of that building had loyalty to you, and unfortunately, there's not many loyal people that run businesses like that. it's like you say that whoever give me money, I'll let you come in there.
Well, they see, hey, I made, they charge rent. Let's say they charge $250, $300. I made $300 this night. Now next week, if this promotion gives me $300, I'm gonna make another $300.
Mm-hmm.
If this promotion, they're gonna do that. But what they don't see is the big picture of eventually nobody's gonna rent my building anymore for wrestling because it's, first of all, it's dry because everybody's running there once a week, and eventually people are going to get. I mean, it's not that a lot of people don't want to go see wrestling every Saturday night.
Right.
They don't. I mean, some of them do. Your diehard wrestling fans would love to go to this same building in my hometown every Saturday night and see wrestling, but most of them just want to go once or twice a month, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So you've run that place out, and then, like you said, if this company comes in here and does a bad show and the wrestling's terrible, I mean, it's like we had a place here in Morganton at one time. We were doing very good. I mean, very good, and so the guy that owned it, eyes got bigger than, and wasn't thinking about big pictures. So he lets this other company come in, and half the wrestlers are drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, he's killed it. Now, one night killed it. So
that's all it takes.
I mean, there was that. Yeah, exactly. So.
Well, as we wind down this podcast, Jeff, I want to have a little contest with you, or not really a contest, but like an opinion. Okay, so if
okay.
we got two teams, okay, two teams that are coming to the ring. Okay, think about their introduction and how they come to the ring. Who has the better entrance? Is it the Rock and Roll Express or the Fabulous Freebirds? And when I say Fabulous Freebirds, I'm talking Terry, Buddy, and Michael, the original Freebirds.
I mean, the Rock and Roll Express, and it's not, because it's just they were so over. I know Ricky Morton talked about they had a Rock and Roll Express lookalike contest one time, and the kids that won, they took them to Carowinds. Well, Carowinds had to shut down.
Yeah, I remember
they
that.
were so popular that they had to escort them out the back entrance because, people were mobbing them and not riding the rides at Carowinds. I mean, think about that. I mean, would you ever see the Freebirds doing that?
Nope.
I mean, it's just, the Freebirds were the first team that, and Michael Hayes was the first one to, do his own entrance music and all that. But the Rock and Roll Express, to me, were and always will be the most popular tag team, over tag team that I've ever seen. Road Warriors had to be a close second, but as far as being over, being cheered, it will definitely be Rock and Roll Express, hands down.
I have to agree with you on that. It's definitely they were definitely some of the best tag team ever. Definitely the most over in the 80s. I mean, Rock and Express were like rock stars. They really were.
Yeah, I would. I've met Ricky Morton 2 or 3 times, and I never would really get with him and talk, but I would just love to hear some of the stories about him getting mobbed by females. I would love to hear some of those stories.
Oh, I can only imagine. I'm sitting here right now. Is some of the we talk about entrances and stuff. I think as far as introductions, Jim Cornette had the best ones for the Midnight Express.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
He was so witty, at some of the stuff that he would say. He'd get on television and say something about the Midnight Express introducing the greatest tag team. They'll make you, or how they say, says the Midnight Express cripple more people than polio.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff he would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember when he introduced the Heavenly Bodies. I mean, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, he said these guys have been in more bedrooms than Johnny Carson. I mean, who would have thought of something like that? I mean, but yeah,
he had some of the great stuff. I mean, it was so great. But I'm with you. I think we have to go with Rock Express having the best entrance in the '80s. From the girls ripping their shirts off to, them being so over they shut down Carowinds. Well, they even done that there for a while. They were doing the grand opens of Hardy's, and I remember Ricky Morton saying one time that that they were doing a grand opening at a Hardy's, I think in Rock Hill, and they shut down I-85.
Yeah, yeah. I can believe it. Well, I mean, he told the story of how Dusty and Flair and all the big guys, they would do two shows a night, and he would be in a group with him and Robert would be with the Midnight Express and other guys on the show, but the big guys would be on the other show. Dusty would do that, in spite to say, hey, I'm more over than you guys are. And they would be putting smaller gyms and pack them out. And he said, we'd make more money than Dusty's group. And, that's the way it always was. I mean, they were just so over at the time.
Yeah, that was that. Unfortunately, Jeff, that's a time in history that unfortunately we'll never get to see again. Yeah, wrestlers today, I'm not taking nothing away from them, but it's a whole different era,
Yeah, and just think Jerry Lawler come up with that.
Yeah, and I was also reading the first tights that they wore, they got it from Fredericks of Hollywood. They went there and bought girl pants to wear to the ring, because they wanted something different. And at the time, K&H wasn't making spandex yet. They were all making, the flat, the what they call the nylon. So Ricky said that that him and Robert came up with the idea. We need something fancy, something that looks like a rocker would wear, like David Lee Roth would wear. So they went to Fredericks of Hollywood and bought these spandex pants with the with pockets on the back. And if you go back and look, they wore those a couple of times on Jim Crockett promotions, but most time they wore those when they were in Mid-South.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, great, Jeff. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a really good time reminiscing of our childhood and of course talking wrestling, and of course talking about the greatest entrances and theme music of the 80s. And man, I wish we could bring that back one more time.
Yeah, me too.
Well, again, Jeff, thank you for coming on the show, and can't wait to see you next week. Fans, if anybody out there listening that's going to be in the Morganton, North Carolina area, you definitely want to come by and check out the NAWA. I'm going to be there. I'm not going to be wrestling on this show. I'm just going to be there. I'm actually going to be recording a podcast, but I believe Jeff will be there, and he's going to be causing some havoc there in Burt County, and it's going to be a really good time. It's August the 31st in Morganton, North Carolina, at the Burke County Fairgrounds. Bell time is 7 p.m. Bring your family out for some great 80. If you want to see some good old Jim Crockett type stuff, come out and watch the NAWA. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another exciting edition of the BengeBuster Show. Make sure you check us out on Facebook and listen to us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube.